Committee. We're happy to have you all here. I think we have a few new faces in the room, and I know it's Wyoming School Board's Appreciation Week. I just wanted to let you know if you are school board members, we appreciate you. I don't know how you do it. I think it might be the most thankless job on the planet, but we sure appreciate you. So those of you that are school board members, thanks for coming and welcome. We started to do a bill last week. I guess I better take roll first. I was kind of waiting for Senator Brennan, but let's go ahead and take roll.
Absolutely, Madam Chairman. Senate Education, February 3rd, 2025. Senator Brennan.
Excused?
Senator Olson.
Here.
Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Senator Scott.
Here.
Chairwoman Schuler.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. So anyway, hopefully Senator Brennan will be in here shortly. We have a couple senators here that have young children, so we give them a little bit of leeway. So we don't always start right at the crack of 8 o'clock. But anyway, today I wanted to give Senator Scott, since there's some new folks obviously in the room, we started testimony on Senate Joint Resolution 6 last week. Probably got through quite a bit of testimony, but I wanted him to go ahead and just give a brief overview of this bill before we go ahead and continue taking testimony. Go ahead.
Okay, the bill is school capital construction constitutional amendment. What it does is it overturns the part of the Campbell Supreme Court decisions that made school capital construction a state responsibility, goes back to the old bond issue system with some changes. There's a mandatory equalization because there's a good reason for some of the things the court did. It provides that there will be a local responsibility, but again, with that mandatory equalization of the mill levies on the constitutional, on the capital construction. And the principal reason for it is the old system has ceased to work because it was funded by the monies we were getting from coal lease bonuses from the federal government on the leasing of coal minerals. That's gone, it's not coming back, and we're starting to draw out of the school foundation program, which is our operating money, and Madam Chairman, we're afraid the capital construction will hurt our ability to fund the operations of the schools and then come back and hit the general fund. So for those reasons, we're looking for an entirely different system. So that's a very quick summary, Madam Chair.
With that, I forgot to mention also, I guess we have some folks in the adjoining room, and I just want to let them know that if they would like to testify on any of these bills today, they will need to come over to this room to do that. We're not set up for testimony over there at the same time as this one, so just so you know. All right, with that, I think we left us with Mr. DeCaria. Would you like to start us off? And Mr. Farmer, you both were up here giving us some information on this bill, and then we had to sneak away and go do our thing upstairs. So welcome back, and we'd love to hear what you'd like to tell us today.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Ken DeCaria, Wyoming School Boards Association. And we're opposed to this bill, but I just wanted to talk about a few things. I mean, one of these parts, maybe a little history, you know. I mean, my first legislative session was 97, and that was right after we got Campbell 1. And so as part of that, as we went through, obviously in the Campbell 2 decision is when they talked about capital construction. And in capital construction, there was nothing, we were looking for a source of funding for capital construction. And there was nothing magical or special about coal lease bonus money, except that it was readily available and it was a source that we could do it. Even at that time, we had discussions that said at some point we're going to have to find a stable revenue stream in order to do this, you know, looking down the road. I mean, that we knew that. One of the things, and the court several times just said that, and I'm reading from just, you know, part of one of the decisions, but it just says, capital construction cannot be based upon local wealth, but must be based on the wealth of the state as a whole. You know, and that's kind of what we've been going along for a long time with that. And so that is one of the, I think, the concerns about going to this system, because it's going to set up inequities no matter how you look at it, because all you're doing is going to equalize to the statewide average. So that means some taxpayers in wealthy counties could have less tax burden to fund schools than those that aren't only equalized up to it. They're still going to have more mills in order to meet that criteria. And even at that, there are some that won't be able to do it unless you allow them to have a lot of mills, because they just don't have the assessed evaluation in order to get there. Some of this also are inequities that we have now, because we have inequities that are going to be set up under this, those districts that already had the buildings built. And there's other districts that have sort of waited patiently for the state to get around to meeting their obligation. And so those people are now all of a sudden going to have to say, well, we had to pay for everybody else's, now we're going to have to pay for ours as well. That just seems like equal protection problem. I mean, you know, that you're setting up two different classes of taxpayers when you do this. I mean, if we'd gone through the system once, that might not be a concern, but it is a concern. One of the other things, charter schools, and I'm not talking about district authorized charter schools, I'm talking about the state authorized charter schools. At some point, the state is going to have to face the fact that they're going to have to build adequate facilities for kids in charter schools. I mean, it's come up several times in the past in the legislature, you know, and they keep pushing it off and saying, well, it's okay if you're in the old Kmart or whatever. And I know that, you know, they brought those facilities up, and you know, to try to be adequate. But after a certain length of time, and at one point the discussion was, you know, if you're up and running for 5 years, then you should get a building like everyone else. Problem with me and this piece of legislation, how do they accomplish that? You know, go to the voters and say, okay, we're just this specialized charter school. We're not in the district, but we need to go to the voters and see if you'll authorize a bond election in order to do that. I'm not even sure that legally they can ask for a bond election in order to do that. I mean, you know, there's a lot of questions that I don't know about that. And I think at the end, we set up probably a conflict between two parts of the Constitution. Education is a fundamental right. It's in Article 1, you know, it comes ahead of guns, you know, and if you, in construction, you know, if you go down, they thought that education was pretty important to make it a fundamental right. And so at the end of the day, you can change another part of the Constitution, but does that enable you to take away the fundamental right for a student to have an equal and equitable education? And I can see a problem in that, Madam Chairman. I'm not a constitutional attorney, nor do I play one on TV, but it gives me some pause. And with that, Madam Chairman, the other thing is we did have some problems with the wording of the language that goes to the voters. And so if you are going to go ahead with this, we'd like to suggest maybe an amendment to that, and this would all be on page 4. And Madam Chairman, the amendment would be on line 5, after tax, period, then strike the rest of that line, all of line 6, all of line 7, and line 8 through revenue, period. And then we would add new language. This amendment shifts the obligation for building schools from the state to local communities. And then, Madam Chairman, if you go down to 10, after return on line 10, it would be return the responsibility to finance. We would add the words, the responsibility to finance. So it's a school capital construction to, you would strike the A at the end of that line. And then you, on line 11, local, we would strike system and make that communities. So it would read, this amendment will return the responsibility to finance school capital construction to local communities. Am I okay, or do you need me to repeat anything?
Ashley, do you need anything read? Of course, we haven't amended them yet, but did you get all that?
Madam Chairman, if I could just hear the addition to that first paragraph in section 2 again, that would be great.
The wording, you mean the new wording?
Yes.
Okay, so it would be, this amendment shifts the obligation for building schools from the state to local communities. Good? Okay, good. And then, Madam Chairman, there's just one more, and if you go all the way to the end, after projects, we would strike the period and insert a comma and include the wording, including authorizing the legislature to impose a new tax to fund equalization, period. And Madam Chairman, we just feel that that is probably a more accurate depiction of what this amendment actually does.
Did you get all that, Ashley?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Okay, good. Questions for, oh, were you doing?
Madam Chairman, that's all I have. Thank
Okay.
you.
Questions for Mr. DeCaria? Okay, thank you for your
Thank you,
testimony.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee.
Mr. Farmer, you're not going to have anything to say today, huh? I'm kind of surprised by that.
I won't disappoint you later.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and continue on with public testimony. Anyone that would like to testify on this bill, please come forward. Welcome, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Jeremy Smith, Business Manager with Sheridan County School District Number 1. Madam Chair, a little history perspective. This is my 27th year in school finance in Wyoming. And so I was at Park 1 in November of 1998 and then moved to Sheridan 1 in August of 2003. Madam Chair, the problem with this bill, and I'm clearly against it, or this joint resolution for amendment to our Constitution, it's unfortunate that we find ourselves here. There have been a series since the mid-2000s, a series of great advisors to the legislature in terms of how to deal with capital construction. The legislature itself has a great system set up with the State Construction Department, School Facilities Commission, Select Committee on School Facilities, and they have continuously advised the legislature on how to proceed constructing school buildings and other educational facilities in Wyoming. And thus far, the legislature has not really listened. And so we find ourselves in this place, and it's a big bill that's coming again, because we've sort of hit a massive pause on capital construction across the state, and some of our bigger high schools are up, and they're very, very expensive. At times, we've created our own inflation in construction because we built too much too fast. It's really not rocket science. If you have a certain number of high schools and you expect them to last a certain number of years, that means you just have to build a certain number every year. Good, bad, or indifferent, rain or shine, doesn't matter, you just build a certain number. Same thing with middle schools, same thing with high schools, same thing with administration buildings or maintenance facilities or whatever, the whole basket of things that it takes to make school districts work. And now you have the added problem of adding additional public schools. We are literally gonna add additional public schools in the form of charter schools. Good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't matter, but they are publicly funded schools. And in addition to that, we're about to publicly fund a whole lot of private schools in this state. And so then you ask yourself, what would be the fiscal or financial or facility obligations to the state after we've just created a whole lot of other private schools that are now public? That's what we're gonna do with the voucher system. So, Madam Chair, the problem with this bill to amend the Constitution is that it's in response to something that we should have done a long time ago and just refused to do as good stewards of these facilities. And so, Madam Chair, that's just my problem with this bill. We don't need this. We just need to actually do the good work that's been advised by very, very smart Wyoming folks for the last 20 plus years. And so, Madam Chair, with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, I see none. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
testimony. Appreciate you. Anyone else that would like to come up and testify on this bill, please come forward. Please introduce yourself.
Madam Chair, Charles Oski, Superintendent in Johnson County School District Number 1. So just maybe a clarification or just a point of view is, it's not about building new schools, but it's about component projects and some of the processes we have in place. Just to give you as an example, we've had a third party come in and evaluate all 6 of our buildings in our district, and we probably have close to $25 to $30 million in roofs, HVAC projects, and all those type of things, just to maintain the current buildings that we do have. And to go to our taxpayers, if that's the interpretation of this bill, is we'd have to go out to bond just to keep our buildings up and operational on a major maintenance budget that's only about 1.5 annually, with a lot of different things, just to take that into consideration. I think that's, I know for sure that would be a hard push in my community to bond, just to keep our schools functionable to where they are. And it's not about building a new school, it's actually about maintaining with some of the costs that HVAC projects. So we currently do have a project even in KC right now, just the HVAC project itself on top of the building is 4.5. That's not something the building or the community would be able to bond. So just something to take into consideration, or maybe just a clarification for me down the road. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all you guys do, because this isn't an easy process. So thanks.
Questions for Mr. Oski? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Anyone else would like to testify? Come on up. Welcome, please introduce yourselves.
Madam Chair, I'm Casey Tillard. I'm a board member in Converse County 2, Glenrock. I'm also a 5th-generation rancher, a father of 3, and husband to a former teacher and coach. I would just like to say that in Converse County 2, we are currently a recapture district. We have a block grant of around 10 million, and we sent back 24.7 last year. And we're the smaller in the county. Converse County 1 roughly sends back 3 times what we do. So I have a really hard time thinking the people of Converse County, how do you look them in the eye and say, we sent back 24 million, we get 10, but we need to pass a bond to raise more money, to build a gymnasium, to update our schools. We have old buildings, and I just have a really hard time believing that Commerce County would buy that and we would never get it passed. So I guess I'm curious how we would stay in business.
Casey, I didn't get your last name.
Tillard.
Oh, any questions for? No? All right, thank you so much. Who's next? Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Carl Manning from Riverton, School District 25. I've been on the board since 1990. So I have a long service. I was on the board before the Campbells. And I remember going and doing bond elections. We were right at the cusp building our middle school. And we got it passed. Great deal of work, great deal of effort on everybody's part to try to get it passed. But it was not enough. Luckily, the Campbells came and we got state assistance to make it so that it would accommodate what we needed. Equity and stability based on bond elections, to me, is a joke. It does not work. You have to go to the electorate, and you are competing with municipalities and other entities that are trying to get things built also and done. So equity and stability will not occur, and we will be in the situation that we were in before Campbell too, where we have the haves and have-nots. So I really hope you think about what it was like before. If you remember, I know Senator Scott would, you would, Madam Chair. So just give it a lot of thought, because it probably won't work as well as you think. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Manning? Yeah, unfortunately, I was around when we had the pre, I hate to date myself, but yeah, so I do remember those days. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Appreciate it. Anyone else would like to testify?
Good morning, Chairman Schuler and committee.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Teresa Chalk, Superintendent, Lincoln 1, Kimmer. Been there 27 years. And I'm on and opposed to this joint resolution also for the reasons everyone else has stated. But I guess my primary concern is the fiscal note states, as Senator Scott said, this constitutional amendment would transfer the primary responsibility to provide school facilities to school districts and would also authorize the legislature to appropriate additional funds to relieve hardship. And those additional funds are through mills that would be passed that every citizen would pay. So I'm just highly concerned that, let's say that every voter did say, hey, yes, let's pass a bond to get the school we want. Just what is the fiscal impact on every taxpayer in Wyoming if this does pass, on the other side of what everybody's been talking about? Because I'm also a recapture district, and like Teton sending 80 million back. The way the recapture has been set up, I believe since you started taking the money, I can't remember the year, but there's millions and millions of dollars that you guys already get to be put into funding schools. So those are my concerns and questions, and with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Thank you so much for your testimony. Anyone else who would like to testify? Anyone in the other room that would like to come across the hall? Oh, okay. Got one more. Welcome, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Lisa Durgan from Campbell County School District Number 1. And I would just like to ask a question of if in fact the districts get to choose and communities get to choose what buildings are built and what major maintenance is done on their buildings that are current, does the rest of the state get to decide if they want the equalization for that? So one district decides, well, we need a new building and it costs too much, and the equalization, however that is done, gets put in place. Does the rest of the state have a choice whether that's too much to pay for a building, or who will oversee those types of buildings and projects if it does actually get equalized, and how will equalization occur? And again, it is the same tone that people who have already been paying for most of everything else will continue to pay more, and it's a tax burden, when in fact most of the feelings I'm getting from a lot of the bills coming out of the Senate and the House this year are for tax relief. And I don't think that this bill is very transparent in the way that really describes how much tax base this could be for everyone that would be mandatory in a year, and how that would occur.
Senator Scott, do you have an answer for?
Yes, sir.
Let me respond to that one. The way the bill is set up, the equalization is provided automatically if the district meets the criteria that they vote for the bond issue. So people whose taxes will go up if the bond issue is passed are the ones that vote on it. And they will pay as if they had the assessed valuation that was the average for the state, which means most districts will get equalization. The state will fund the equalization the way we fund anything else. Constitutional amendment says we can dedicate sources, we can appropriate money for it. But if we don't, then there'll have to be a statewide mill levy that's set to recover the costs needed to provide the equalization. You have to put that in, or you won't be able to sell a bond. So the equalization has to be there. So that's the way the system would work. It would be an automatic thing from the state as per the Constitution.
And
Do you have another question?
That's my point, is that the transparency of this is that everyone in the state will pay more taxes through this, and a continual problem that we've had is now being solved by just making taxes higher, of which it appears that the Senate and House are trying to reduce those taxes, but in fact, this bill does the opposite.
All right, any follow-up?
No, Chair. Yes, the expectation is that frankly, the current system has been a pork barrel system because every legislator has to defend their home school district. Nobody knows enough to say no to another school district, and it would be remembered if we did. So make your own estimate. My estimate is that we've spent 3 times as much on school capital construction as we really needed. And the expectation is that this will, somebody's got to pay for it somehow, somewhere, the stuff that's necessary. But this amendment will mean there'll be a lot less to be paid for.
Thank you.
You betcha. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else who would like to testify today on this bill? Going. All right, looks like we might have everybody. All right, anybody online for this one?
Not for this one, Madam Chairman.
Okay, then, we'll go ahead and close public testimony. What's your pleasure, committee?
Move the bill.
Okay, it's been moved by Senator Brennan. Any additions or amendments? Yes, go ahead, Senator Scott.
I will say, with regard to the ballot statement, I had several attempts myself at writing a ballot statement, was unable to do one that was unbiased, and had it done by the drafting attorneys, and I think it's been a perfectly good job.
Okay,
It is a difficult thing to write. With regard to some of the other complaints, Madam Chairman, this does not affect major maintenance, and we will have to continue to deal with that. This does not contemplate that that's going to be part of capital construction and governed by this. So we'll have to deal with major maintenance. And that is an expensive item, but it's not nearly as expensive as the capital construction.
other comments? Yes, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The only thing that I haven't been able to square in my head is the comment of what we do with state charter schools. I would like Senator Scott to explain how state authorized charter schools would fit into the scheme.
Senator?
Madam Chairman, the state authorized charter schools would probably do what the one up in my area is doing. It's running now in a school that was thrown away by the school district when they built new schools and proved to be perfectly acceptable, the school in Mills, but it's not big enough to meet what they expect. So they're financing a new school with a lease arrangement, and that lease will be part of the operating expense of the charter school. It's a different way of doing it, but it works. And frankly, one of the reasons it works is we fund our school operating so very generously that we can afford to do it that way. So it looks like that's a practical answer. I think in most cases, they'll probably find a place to lease, but as you know from your experience here in Cheyenne, that takes a while and it can be difficult. We were fortunate that instead of tearing the old school down, the school district gave it to the town of Mills, which wanted a school, and eventually leased it to the charter school. That was a big help. So they will have to scramble a bit, but that's my expectation as to how they'll handle it when they need to have something built.
Follow-up?
Yeah, Madam Chairman,
Go
just
ahead.
responding to that, it sounds like the solution in your head is to just continue the leasing program, which at some point, maybe that's not addressed by this bill, but at some point, I think that does need to be addressed. I think that there's a cost savings for the state of Wyoming to own a building versus paying a lease in perpetuity, but that's not necessarily addressed by this bill.
Yeah, that's right, that's not. Now, you could do what was traditionally done in the bond system for years, when you had competing communities. You put the charter school in when the regular school system needs something. And so you get a bond issue that has both aspects. That would certainly work, because those are public schools. And that that's a matter of local creativity, but it is certainly feasible and would work under this.
Other comments? Okay. No amendments or any amendments? Senator Olson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do think that I'm okay with some of these language changes I think that we should work with the School Board Association to try to get this language so that everyone is comfortable with it. So I would like to make an amendment. I'll do them, I don't agree with all of them, so I'll do them in pieces.
Okay.
But my first amendment would be on page 4, line 5, after tax, to strike the balance of the language through revenue period on line 8, and insert, this amendment shifts the obligation of building schools from the state to local communities.
One more time, just to be safe. Make sure Ashley has it.
This amendment shifts the obligation of building schools from the state to local communities, period.
Okay, any discussion on that? Yes.
Madam Chairman, so you're emphasizing the local control feature.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's fair.
Any discussion, any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? Okay, that amendment passes. Any others?
Okay, yes. My second amendment would still be on page 4, line 10. After return, insert the responsibility to finance. And then at the end of line 10, strike A. Line 11, strike system, and insert communities. That would be consistent with our language above.
Okay, did you get that, Ashley?
Yes, I did, Madam Chairman.
Okay, you want to go read that back, just to be safe?
Absolutely. This amendment will return the responsibility to finance school capital construction to local communities with the addition of mandatory state equalization aid, and so on
Okay.
and so forth.
That's good, okay. Any others? Well, I guess that's a separate one, though. We better go ahead and discuss that. Any discussion on that one? Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that amendment's passed. Any
That's it.
others?
That's it for me.
Okay, anybody else have any amendments or changes? Okay. Any other discussion on the bill? Yes, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. So I'm going to be a no on the bill, and it comes down to a few things that we've discussed and we've heard in public testimony. I do appreciate the intent. We obviously need to come up with a solution, and we don't have one right now. We relied for a long time on COLE's bonuses. Those are gone, so we've struggled since then to find a reliable funding stream for school capital construction. So I do appreciate the intent and the challenge here. But, you know, this joint resolution has been proposed a few times in the past, and it's largely unchanged. And the concerns that I've had over time really relate to the equity and how it is actually implemented, where even with the equalization, you still really do have the capacity to build new schools based on local resources, because only when you're below the median do you gain. So you have districts that have the capacity to have de minimis mill levies relative to the average, and so local resources become the dominating factor, and as a result you'll have some communities that are capable of raising the funds and some communities that would struggle. At the same time, when you have communities that might struggle, or even the ones relying on it, by leaving it up to a local choice, and this is where, you know, if I was just being self-interested, Madam Chairman, I'd support this, because my school district will just always build schools. We'll pass everything in my district. But I don't think that's the case around the state. So I think you end up with disparity among districts based on the likelihood of the local voting constituents to pass a vote. And if you don't have that vote pass, you don't get a new school. So that too creates inequity just based on the communities. And the third concern, which I've always had with this particular bill is that it's much more legislating in the Constitution than it is providing for a constitutional opportunity. This is a bill that goes in the Constitution as opposed to just a clear allowance in the Constitution. I mean, if we wanted to do something like this, and this was the right idea, just having a little bit of language that provides that the state could create a program like this through legislation, and then provide nearly infinite flexibility so that we could go back and revise. The challenge with the way this is structured is you're putting it into the Constitution, and without an additional constitutional amendment, you can't tweak it. There's no tweaking. So it doesn't lend itself to a long-term solution because we don't know how well, I have concerns with how well it's going to work, but even if it was working well, it would be likely that you'd want to come up with some revisions, and this doesn't necessarily provide a lot of that revision. So for all of those reasons, even though I do think we need to try and identify a solution, this isn't the solution. And Madam Chairman, at the same time, realistically, it shouldn't be lost on us in the context of what we're doing, where we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts to property tax right now. And it just so happens that the magnitude of the property tax cuts that we're talking about is roughly the magnitude of Capcom on a given year, excluding major maintenance. And to Senator Scott's point, the major maintenance usually is more than what we spend on new schools. Major maintenance is the dominant number. New schools is significant, but lesser. Anyway, for all those reasons, I just don't think this is a solution to the problem, but I continue to appreciate the discussion and exploring for solutions.
Other comments? Senator Scott, go ahead.
Responding to that, a couple of things. This is not going to the median, this is going to the basically a weighted average in terms of the way it's written. Second, my experience there was considerable comment, Madam Chairman, of the risks of the bond issue system. I watched that for years before the Campbell decision. And what I observed was that the voters, and not in Albany County, but in my county and in other counties, would pass a bond issue if it was really needed. And if it got gold-plated, they wouldn't pass it. And the school district would have to cut the issue back to what was really needed, and then it would pass. And that system worked successfully for nearly 110 years, from statehood to the time of the Campbell decisions. There were some real problems, and the equalization and the other provisions here deal with those. Yes, it does allow districts with a very high assessed valuation, and there's a handful of Teton County, part of Sublette County, Sweetwater County, part of Conver County, maybe all of Converse County these days, Campbell County. They will be able to construct at a little lesser mill levy. We hit them with recapture on the operating side, but I could not figure a way to do that reasonably here. And we've been looking for some time for a better solution to this, and we can't find it. I do not think this goes into the detail that you would in legislation. I think there's plenty of room for the legislation to fit in the details. But if you don't put the basics in, it won't get done. And for instance, the provision of the mandatory state equalization, if that's not there, you cannot sell the bond. And if you don't have it there, then you are being radically unjust. So, because the Supreme Court did what it did for a reason, it just hasn't worked as well as they thought it would. So, Madam Chairman, for all those reasons, I'm for the bill.
Any other comments? I would just comment that very similar to Senator Rothfuss, I'm nervous about a variety of things right now in our state. Well, the equity issues, I think, were mentioned by a number of our folks out here in the audience. Timing right now is just, I think, more than anything else. The equity issues, we might be able to get our, wrap our head around, I don't know. But the timing is bad right now. You know, we've got property taxes, you know, bills left and right, both the House and the Senate. And we know that the majority of those, 70% of those are for our schools. And I just don't know that the timing is quite right. I think, you know, obviously with the demise of the coal leases, we know that we're gonna be in trouble. And I just think, you know, I think back to the pre-Campbell days when I was still teaching. We actually built a couple of schools in one of the districts I taught in. We had plenty of money. We were in an oil boom. No problem passing those. They zipped right through. I don't know that we could pass one in any of the districts that I represent right now. And I don't know that we should try to do that right now, because I think that, as I said before, even though we're trying to do property tax relief for our constituents, that means, particularly without backfills with a lot of those bills, you know, our cities and counties and schools are gonna be really hurting. So with that, I just think timing is part of the issue here. Maybe if we get to a point down the road where we have to do this, let the people speak and we'll see how it goes. But for right now, I'll be a no vote. Any other comments? Okay. Yes, go ahead, Senator Olson.
Madam Chairman, I was just gonna follow up from your comment, just to be clear, schools are backfilled by the legislative stabilization reserve account. So whatever we do with property taxes at the end of the day, schools won't be impacted by that.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Office.
Well, I want to follow up on that. That only lasts for as long as the LISRA lasts.
Yeah.
And depending on what our burn rate is, we break it. And in fact, when it falls below $500 million in the LISRA, then we start prorating the delivery of funds. So it's true for 1 year, and I don't know how many. Well, we'll see how quickly we burn through it. But there is no backfill, right? It's spending our savings now because we're cutting revenue, and that's not the same thing.
Touche.
Senator Olson?
I was just gonna say touche.
Touche, yeah, okay. Any other comments? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and take roll.
Madam Chairman, on Senate Joint Resolution 6, School Capital Construction Constitutional Amendment, do pass as amended. Senator Brennan?
Aye.
Senator Olson?
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss? No. Senator Scott?
Aye.
Chairwoman Schuler?
No,
3 aye, 2 no.
okay, that bill is passed. Senator Scott, you'll be taking that up on the floor. All right, next bill for our consideration is also Senator Scott's. He's gonna be busy today. Senate File 176 is called Fixing Reading Failure. 178, sorry about that. Senator Scott, time's yours.
Madam Chairman, and I will try to be, it's a complicated bill, and I had a fairly lengthy presentation, but I'm going to try to abbreviate that so that people can have a chance to talk. Let me start out by saying, Madam Chairman, that I'm passionate about the importance of education and passionate about the importance of public education that is available to everybody and has been one of the strengths of our country. But I'm passionate in that order. And it was a shock to me when I came back to the Education Committee after significant absence, Madam Chairman, and first document I got my hands on was the consultants report on the last recalibration. And we go out and hire the best consultants we can, Madam Chairman, nationally to be able to defend our school finance system. And their report said very bluntly that we were not getting our money's worth from our K-12 system. And they pointed very specifically to the results at 3rd and 4th grade on the state assessment test, the YTOP, and said that the children on that test that were testing basic and below basic, as opposed to the proficient and advanced categories, but the basic and below basic, would not be able to function as adults in our modern high-tech economy. And, Madam Chairman, that is a horrible indictment of our system. Now, I would say there's a countervailing thing there. Frankly, my personal observation is that the school districts, school systems are doing a very good job for the kids that are learning how to read. And if you want to get confidence in the future of our country, go judge a high school debate tournament sometime, and you'll see the best and the brightest and how well they can do. But we're still leaving way too many kids behind. And that's, Madam Chairman, the genesis of this bill, because I'm afraid if we don't fix the difficulties in our public school system, we are going to face a drive from the public, and we're already seeing it. We're losing students to it, for not only charter schools, but publicly funded private schools. And you can destroy the public education system, or at least greatly damage it, Madam Chairman, if that gets out of hand. So we've got to be able to compete. We've got to do a better job than we're doing. And what we did was say, okay, the consultants have said that our statewide results are bad. We were losing about half the kids, a little less than half. We're not getting adequately taught how to read. We went and looked, and we found there are tremendous differences among the several school districts. There are ones that get 70% or better into the proficient and advanced categories. There are ones that get 30% into those categories. There are ones that get 20% in those categories. There are a few that get less than 10% into those categories. And we said, why? It's not funding. We looked at the funding. Some of the best school districts in the state were some of the worst funded on a per student basis. And we did a correlation coefficient, and it was negative, which I think is probably more a compliment to our funding system, Madam Chairman. We're putting our money where the problems are, than it is saying the more you spend, the less you get. There might be a little of that. We looked at the size of district. Didn't seem to make any difference, other than the three biggest were bad. But it didn't seem to really make any difference. The districts are all over the place. We looked at poverty, and yes, that does make a difference. You look at the YTOP test reports results for the proficient and for all the students, and for the students on the free and reduced lunch separately. And what we found was there was a correlation between poverty and not having good results, but that the better managed school districts were able to take their kids who were in poverty and get better results from them than the state average for all the children. So that is a problem that can be overcome with management. It looks to us like the teacher corps is the same, roughly, going across the state, and really pretty good. That's not where the problem is. Madam Chairman, my conclusion, and I think the conclusion of a number of us, is that it is the priorities that are set at the local level and the competence at the local level. This is an issue of performance. So what this bill does, Madam Chairman, it violates local control right up front. And does it based on the data, on the performance that really counts, which is teaching all the kids what they're going to need to know to perform in our modern society. And what we're doing, Madam Chairman, divide the districts into two different classes. The ones that are highly performing at the business of teaching reading, which are getting 60% or more of their students into the proficient and advanced category in those 3rd and 4th grade reading tests, and the rest of the districts. We are universally encouraging parental involvement, Madam Chairman, because it's quite clear that students do better if their parents and the school districts are on the same page on the importance of reading and on trying to help the child. So we're pushing parental involvement. We're pushing notification, screening for everybody to find the kids. We're pushing parental involvement of the results of the screening and the results of the assessment tests. And we're being then much less prescriptive as to what else you have to do for the districts that are doing well. They know what they're doing, leave them alone. We have much more detail on, we're requiring individual plans for students. We're much more detail on what's got to be in those plans, some of which I thank the State Department of Education. We stole the language that you gave us. Unfortunately, we couldn't use as much as I might because that came so late in the drafting process. But we used that language. We do have a retention provision in there, Madam Chairman. Now, we have a 3-year delayed effective date on that part of it, because it's a 4th grade retention for up to 2 years on 4th grade, and 3rd grade, if we can't get an agreed plan with the parent, it's a year. But that's pushed off because we want to solve the problem well before that and give the district plenty of notice and plenty of time to solve it, Madam Chairman. So that's a feature of it. We do have a provision for giving the parents a cause of action, legal ability to sue legally with some limits on how much. So it's not designed to enrich the trial lawyers, but it is an effective remedy if the parents aren't notified as the bill requires, if there isn't a plan developed as the bill requires, or if the plan isn't implemented, and I've heard plenty of complaints about that. So that's there, and that's there in good part because the earlier iteration of this, the 2001 bill, Madam Chairman, which had some of these features, not all of them, but some of them requiring individual attention to the needs of the students that weren't being met, were flatly ignored by many of the districts. And I do not care to repeat that experience, Madam Chairman. We learned the hard way on that one. There is a strengthening of the Department of Education in their staffing and ability to have, I've called it an operations research staff, partly because that's not very well defined, and the superintendent can define it as she chooses by who she hires. That's provided for there, but there's no appropriation because the expectation is it would be funded out of the existing size, and you get vacant positions in something the size of the education department, and that'd be the source. There is a provision because there is some history elsewhere of people cheating on performance exams. And we're using the YTOP assessment test. It's not a perfect test. I have never seen a perfect assessment test and never expect to. But it's an old saying amongst managers that if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. And we need something to use, and the YTOP is there, it's known, and there is a provision if there's cheating on it, that could cost somebody their BTSB license. And we thought that was an appropriate penalty. Madam Chairman, that's a very quick overview, and I'd like to end, because I've heard, well, there's no problems. With Wyoming, we're better than the rest of the country. Madam Chairman, we are better than the average of the rest of the country, no question about that. You look at the NAEP, and they're highly respected. But leaving half the children, and it is currently about half the children, behind is just not acceptable. And I'd like to read from my hometown newspaper from this last Saturday saying, and they had a story about how Wyoming was doing a little better than the average nationally. They say, even though Wyoming scores remain above the average, students that score proficient or above remains below 50% in every area. And that's the summary out of the news media, and I think it is fundamentally accurate, Madam Chairman. And we need to do something about it. This bill does.
Questions for good Senator Scott? Okay. I may have some more questions, I think, as time goes on, but I'd certainly like to hear some testimony, and I see our state superintendent's here, so why don't we go ahead and open it up and let our agency take first shot at this. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Megan Degenfelder, State Superintendent of Public Instruction. With me is Shelley Hamill, Chief Academic Officer at the Department of Education. While I appreciate the bringer's attention to literacy and wanting to tackle this issue, it is also one of my top priorities. I think that if we really want to address literacy reform, that the bill as written today doesn't quite get us there. And so what I've handed out to you is some language that, and we did meet with Senator Scott ahead of the session, and the senator did incorporate some definition changes and some structure to the IRP, the individual reading plan in his bill. But I think that truly, if we want to address literacy and if we want to do it in a really statewide manner, we have to look at it in a comprehensive way. We have to look at the entire statute. If you read our literacy statute, while it has been made better over the years, it has still been historically difficult to understand. There is confusion between terms like assessment, screener, instrument, and it lacks a lot of national best practices that we see across the country. And so as we've begun to have this discussion of what comprehensive literacy means, I think that we're at a point where we have to decide, do we continue to amend the statute, or do we look at really changing, rewriting the literacy statute? And I believe that the latter is the approach that we should really take if we want to move the needle when it comes to literacy. I think it's also important that if we have a stick when it comes to literacy, that we're making sure that we're equipping our teachers and districts with best practices, with professional development opportunities. And so I think given all of this, and we haven't had a chance to work with the committee on a lot of this language, and you'll see it's truly a rewrite of the entire literacy statute. And with the bringer, based on that, I would humbly ask the committee to consider tabling the bill for today so that we can discuss it later in the week. I think that at this point, it perhaps is too difficult to amend if we want to really look at that comprehensive reform. But I want to give that a chance for the members of the board, or excuse me, of the committee to be able to discuss the differences between amending the statute versus a full rewrite. And so that would be my request today, Madam Chairman, is that we take the time to really go through those two options, try to reconcile these. I think there are some points in Senator Scott's bill that we agree on, we want to incorporate, but would like to see if we can come together in a more comprehensive way.
Senator Scott, would you like to reply to that?
Madam Chairman, and they gave us this on the Monday before the session started, and I looked at it as carefully as I could, was able to incorporate a few things, but it would have been impossible to get the bill in form by the bill deadline, given the LSO processes, and you all know how that works. Frankly, I think what we need to do at this point is start down the road with this framework. The things that get implemented in the very first year are the requirement for parents to be able to say no to advancement in the grades, in the very early grades. They are the starting to they tell the districts, this is serious, we're going to go on and we're going to insist on better reading performance. Madam Chairman, a lot of this is a refinement that should be considered in the interim between now and the budget session and the next session. The deadlines in the bill as it stands now would accommodate that without great harm. And frankly, I don't agree with everything here, although most of it I do. So I think the best strategy is to proceed with the bill at this point. This doesn't speak to things like the enforcement mechanisms, doesn't speak to some of the fundamental requirements that we're going to insist on at our level to make sure that there's progress made, because we have delayed way too long, Madam Chairman, and we're destroying the prospects of way too many students. So we met with them, the State Department, in December. We incorporated some suggestions that were made at that point. That was easy. We met with them a month later, this is right the day before the session, and it was just impossible. And I think the opportunity to do things is now, and the necessity to do things is right now.
Other comments on superintendent's suggestion? Yes, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I do think there's a significant set of changes, but it, in my opinion, is a much better structure and approach. As I went through it, there's a lot of mandates and requirements in the bill draft that we have before us. A lot of those are, I think, more thoughtfully worked through in the alternative language from the superintendent and the WDE. And we had this conversation last year about, required holding kids back as opposed to providing summer programs and supports. And it does seem like something that we need to spend more time working on. And, I'd be inclined, if we want to move something forward, tabling and working through this revision and trying to put it in a draft form and see if we can have it coalesce, but it would be a lot of work. Alternatively, honestly, I'm probably most comfortable with picking this entire rewrite as an interim topic and doing the entire rewrite, probably largely consistent with what we see here, during the interim. But if we want to do it now, I'd favor tabling it and working up a substitute bill. If we want to take our time on it, then doing the rewrite during the interim. I do think that, when we contemplate this, there's absolutely no question that we have a lot of students that need additional support. There's no doubt. And we've spent a lot of time on this committee over the years trying to work through that and have scaffolded RTI type approaches and making sure that we're identifying and doing a better job. So I do think that we've been improving. But the idea that some of our districts are doing great and other districts are doing badly based on just the YTOP score really is very contrary to the Accountability and Education Act. And when we built that act, we brought in experts, and the experts made it very clear that you can't just evaluate a summative assessment score and determine the success of a school, you have to look at growth. You have to capture a lot of other aspects. And so while the Y-top is that snapshot, and we use it as a summative assessment, and then we see the NAEP in similar capacity, it's not the end-all be-all, right? That's not what we should be relying on. And I think there's too heavy of a reliance on that in the bill draft that we're contemplating. And the reality, as Senator Scott mentioned, right, we regrettably, we fell in the NAEP scores that were released on Wednesday of last week. In fourth grade reading, we fell to number 2 in the country from number 1 in the country. And I regret that, right? I mean, let's get back to work, folks. Come on, what are we doing here? We do that very well, though. And again, that's not to diminish the importance of identifying, as Senator Scott wants, every student and make sure every student has the maximum potential. In my view, our cuts to summer programs, probably 7 years ago, was a substantial hit to that, because we took away resources in after-school programs. We took away resources that were intended to help bridge this gap. And we're not talking in the IEP students, right? We have resources available, but it's the folks that have not been identified to need an IEP, but are on reading plans and other reading support structures that we don't necessarily have enough resources for. So this is a big topic. We do it incredibly well already, but there's a lot more we can do, and I'm very much more inclined to go the route of the superintendent and just try and do a rewrite and get it right. But I don't know whether the session's the appropriate time or a great interim topic, and just do a full rewrite, which it is in need of.
Senator Olson?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, before we get too deep into public testimony, I think how we decide to proceed could affect that. The superintendent has shared this version with me, and I've reviewed it. I've reviewed the bill as drafted as well, and I do like the superintendent's revision. I would prefer not to kick it to an interim. I would prefer to resolve it during the session now, because I think the need is real, as Senator Scott has more than well laid out a foundation for. So, but the only way I think to procedurally do that and be fair to the process and the public would be that we discuss the substitute bill. This is really a substitute bill. This is not just an amendment to the bill. I think it would require us to table the bill, notice a different day where we have the substitute bill published, and the public can discuss that. If we're gonna proceed that way, then we probably shouldn't waste a lot of time taking public testimony on Senate File 178 as written. But if we're not gonna proceed that way, then let's proceed with 178, because I want to see something come out of this committee. So those are my thoughts, Madam Chairman.
Yeah. Senator Brennan, do you have any thoughts on this? Your choice? Are you leaning one way or the other? Go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I think just looking at these two and some of the differences, I think if we all put our heads together and do some stuff, I think we could come up with a substitute bill that would have some of the best of both bills in it. I would be okay with that.
Senator Scott, where are you at on this?
Having looked at this, when they dropped it on me on the day before the session, I didn't think at that point that I could turn it into legislation that would work for this session. So I prefer to handle the State Department of Education language. The part that I didn't succeed in getting into this, I would prefer to handle it during the interim, that part, and come forward the bill it is, because I think we have a unique opportunity to set the ball in motion and to get things done. And I just don't think it's feasible because what the deadline for bills coming out of committee is when, Madam Chairman?
Friday.
Friday. I don't think we can get it put into a substitute bill. I didn't think we could get it drafted into a bill in time to meet the bill drafting deadline. When I looked at it after they gave it to us the day before the session, I don't think you can maybe import a concept or two, but I don't see how you can do the whole thing. I think we need to proceed with the 78 as it is.
Okay, thank you. I think I kind of lean towards Senator Olson's in her office. I think there's some good in both of these bills, some really good things in both bills. And if we decided to go forward with 178, obviously, I think I would have some amendments. It's a very complicated bill, you know, it's 26 pages, but it really has some good thoughts and some good ideas. And I'm in favor of most of those. And likewise, looking at the department's ideas, I looked at those before the session started as well. And I think there's some good ideas. I would like to see us maybe try and coalesce. And the question is whether or not we can do it now or whether it would be an interim. I would maybe move towards trying to lay it back, but I would wait for a motion from the committee. Yeah.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, and I think that we have two paths in front of us. If we can table this bill and then request that a substitute bill be drafted for 178 based on the language provided by the superintendent. And if LSO, because I think Senator Scott is accurate that we don't know if they can get this together in time. But if our staff can't get this put together, we can bring 178 off the table.
That's true.
We meet Friday morning, so we have the entire week to try to get the bill draft. And then Friday morning comes around, we can, Thursday, because you'll need to notice it.
I'll notice Thursday.
But I think we can have two paths in front of us. So I would move to table 178.
Okay. Any more discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
No.
Okay,
And then do you need a
That
formal
passed.
motion for
yes.
for
If you would
this?
make
Okay,
that,
then I
yes.
would move that a substitute bill be drafted for 178 to incorporate the language from the superintendent of public instruction's amendments that we have in front of us.
Okay. Good superintendent, we better go ahead and vote on that first. Discussion on that. Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, that is passed. Superintendent, are you ready to get to work on this with us?
Madam Chairman, absolutely. We will work tirelessly on this. Again, I sincerely appreciate that the bringers work on this. I think that we can get there. I think that he's right, that there is an opportunity here. And I want to make sure that we do it right and that we truly move forward on literacy reform in the state. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Great, thank you so much. We'll move forward and get this substitute bill going, and we will make sure, Senator Scott, one way or the other, if we can't make it happen in time, we will go ahead and bring back 170. I'll make sure it happens. So, all right. With that, we do have time for one more bill.
Madam
So-
Chairman,
Yes,
I just want you to be aware, LSO does not have the mechanism to post substitute bills prior to them going to committee of the whole. So it will not be published to the website prior to your committee meeting whenever you want to take up 178.
okay, well, that may change some things. Maybe we can discuss that later. That does bring up a concern. Hadn't thought about that. Senator Olson?
Yeah, I think that notice is important.
I do
I'm not
too.
sure how you do that other than figure out who the majority of the stakeholders are, and we can provide them with copies of the legislation in advance of whatever meeting you have, if that's Friday or whatnot. I don't know how else you do that. I guess I forgot.
Yeah, I did
That
too.
doesn't publish.
Yeah. Well, anything else on this? We've made the motions, we've approved them. I guess we'll just go forward and we'll do the best we can to try to get the notice out to the stakeholders that would be involved and go from there. So with that, we will start on our third bill. It is called Educational Bankruptcy Act. This is also sponsored by Senator Scott, Senate File 173. He's been busy, and away we go, Senator Scott.
Okay, Madam Chairman. What this is an effort to deal with the very worst of our school districts out there. The bill is aimed this at, what it basically does is take the districts that are the very least successful. And it does follow the strictures of the Campbell decision in terms of the state responsibility for education. And it sets up some criteria, and then if a district meets those criteria, and they're in the bill, you can see them on page 3, the minimum criteria for getting an educational bankruptcy, what you have to meet to get there. Page 3, line 4, 60% or more of the grade 3 students score basic or below basic on the English language arts part. That's what we were talking about on the other bill, but reversed, so that only you have to have 60% in the bad categories to qualify. 50% or more of the 8th grade students score basic or below basic, in mathematics. 8th grade, because a lot of the mathematics instruction is between 4 and 8, and that seems to be a good measure. And then 25% or more of the grade 10 students score below basic on English language arts, mathematics, and science portions of the YTOP. So that's catching the high school level. And you have to meet all those criteria, all 3 of them, to be eligible for educational bankruptcy. So you have to really be bad. And Madam Chairman, what it contemplates is that the judgment on the part of the state superintendent to which districts you have to meet those criteria, and the superintendent has to judge that things would be better if you went through bankruptcy. You petition the district court, appoint a bankruptcy trustee, you terminate the school superintendent and make the local school board advisory for a period until you can overcome the difficulties. And then there's a provision, Madam Chairman, that how you get out of the educational bankruptcy, what the criteria are. There is in the other bill, protection of the integrity of the YTOP. There's the same provision if people are cheating on that they can lose their license. And Madam Chairman, this has some rough edges in it. And basically, by introducing the bill this time, what I'm trying to do is put this on the agenda as something I think we're going to have to do. I would mention one other thing in this bill. Madam Chairman, you have a special problem with the 3 districts on the reservation, who are frankly not always the 3 worst performing, but often the 3 worst performing. There's sometimes you get a non-reservation district that does as bad as they do. But I think there's a special cultural problem there that I don't think we can solve, Madam Chairman. So the bill is structured that there can be an exception for those, and really gives the tribal business councils considerable influence in whether or not one of those winds up in this process or not. It would depend on how they felt about it. So that is a special provision in there, Madam Chairman. I think the bill is, I'm really trying to put this on the agenda for the future, Madam Chairman. So whether we put it forward or not, I would just, unless we fix it more than I think we can right now, I think it would probably be best not to enact it all the way into law, but get it on the agenda. pretty standard tactic, Chairman. You get something on the agenda for the future.
Questions or comments for for Senator Scott? So Senator, are you, just my question, I guess, for you is are you wanting us to take public testimony on it? and
Yeah.
Just
and
get the
public
discussion started today?
Testimony,
and-
get the discussion started, and maybe even send it up to the floor, but then we talk to the majority leader.
Okay,
What's the best way to proceed?
okay, all right, good.
And some of the things, this committee can be pretty creative, some of the things, maybe they can take care of the rough edges.
Okay.
But there are some in here, Madam Chairman, and I know it.
Okay, well, good.
This is a new concept for us.
Absolutely. All right. If there's no comments from the committee, we'll go ahead and open it up for public testimony. Anyone that would like to testify on this bill, please come forward. Welcome, please introduce yourself, even though we know you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Brian Farmer. I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming School Boards Association. I agree with Senator Scott. I don't think that this bill is a good bill or a ready bill for us to do today. Madam Chair, in 2013, the Wyoming legislature passed the Wyoming Accountability and Education Act. So we have something in place right now that is designed to look at the performance of schools, at the performance of districts, and to try to assess what is it that we can do under the Accountability and Education Act to support schools in getting better. And that's the fundamental difference between the Wyoming Accountability and Education Act and this Bankruptcy Act, is the Bankruptcy Act takes a punitive measure where the Wyoming Accountability and Education Act took the approach of support. And so I think really the question would be looking at our current system and say, is it working? And if it's not working, what is it that we could do to our current system to address the additional supports necessary to Wyoming districts in order to help improve student achievement? And Madam Chairman, as Senator Rothfuss mentioned previously, when we take on these big comprehensive reforms, I really do think it's a good idea to hear from stakeholders, but also to hear from experts, to hear from folks that can help inform and guide decisions. And so when we went into the Accountability and Education Act, there was an advisory committee. And an advisory committee helped to inform the direction for that Accountability and Education Act. And in addition to the advisory committee, there were experts that the legislature had that came in and talked to them about what it was that was within the field of education that people could do. Madam Chair, probably our biggest concern with regard to the Bankruptcy Act is that it's essentially a pathway to state takeover. It takes it out of the hands of the locally elected folks and moves toward a state takeover. And most research on school takeovers has said that they're generally not successful. Studies find little to no evidence that they significantly improve student academic performance, and that they have at times even exacerbated some of what's happened. Most research shows that state takeovers do not lead to significant improvements in student achievement in math or reading when examined on a large scale. And at least 3 studies have found that takeovers don't increase academic achievement at all. The latest, a May 2021 working paper by researchers from Brown University and the University of Virginia, looked at all 35 state takeovers between 2011 and 2016 and quoted, said, on average, we find no evidence that takeovers generate academic benefits. So I think it would be good to hear from experts. Do these kinds of models actually make a difference? And to the degree that we talk about comprehensive reform at all, I know that in addition to school board members here today in your committee room, there's also a group of high-achieving teachers The Level Up program is here, and those outstanding teachers from across Wyoming are here. And frankly, we have a great deal of trust in our teachers, and believe that our Wyoming teachers do a good job with their instructional program and with educating our kids. And to have the opportunity to hear their perspective, to hear their voices, to have input from across the board of what makes a better system. If it's not the punitive approach, if the research says that doesn't work, then how can we strengthen the support approach to make it better? Madam Chair, I think that's all I have to say, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Farmer? Senator Olson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Farmer, are there states that have educational bankruptcy acts? I'm not very familiar with this concept.
Mr. Farmer?
Madam Chair, no, I'm not aware of a state that has an Education Bankruptcy Act. My reference is to efforts by states to have another entity take over the educational program for the local educational authority.
Okay.
Okay, any follow-up? Okay, good. Other questions for Mr. Farmer? Okay, Senator Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I would respond to that. I'm not aware of another. This is a different concept. The others have, I think, involved often state departments of education running schools for a while or hiring somebody else to do it. This is a little different approach. My question for Mr. Farmer is on the Assessment and Accountability Act that you were referring to. Are you aware of it being used to actually improve education at all? It seems to me we're trying to use it now, but it seems to me it's been there and nobody's been paying much attention to it. Our consultants did, and for the previous recalibration, as I mentioned in the introduction of the other bill. But other than that, it doesn't seem to me like it's been used.
Mr. Farmer?
Madam Chair, I really would beg to differ on that. I think schools and districts absolutely use it and are in fact under obligation to share their results with their communities. So there are report cards every year to parents, to communities on how the district is doing. So there's a lot of transparency. The public is aware. The districts look at that for their continuous improvement plans. They're required to do continuous improvement plans and submit those to the state. Under previous federal legislation, when a school was deemed a failing school, parents had the obligation or the opportunity, I guess, to put their kid in a different school. And many districts have continued to provide that opportunity to parents, saying that if you wish to move your kid based on our school performance level. Where I would agree that we need to put more attention in is under the statewide system of support. The statewide system of support is a critical element of the Wyoming Education and Accountability Act that really did not get adequately resourced, and districts did not have the ability or the opportunity to utilize those external supports to the full extent to improve education outcomes.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Ralphus.
I just wanted to pile on that comment. So the statewide system of supports is part of the Accountability and Education Act, but it required additional resources because you can't just say you're going to provide support and then not provide a lot of support. And that was to be coordinated through the WDE. We've never really funded that because it costs money. So the mechanism is there, and I'm not saying that nothing's happening. They do provide support, so it's not a zero. It's just not as much as we anticipated or intended, I should say, when we were putting together the Accountability and Education Act. And it's just it goes back to our traditional problem of we don't like to spend money, and it's hard to have nice things.
Other questions for Mr. Farmer? Yes, go ahead, Senator Scott.
We have been among the top states in the union on spending money on education. That thing seems to me as we were second or third in the most recent ranking I saw from the taxpayers. We have spent vast sums on education. And the performance has been, in dealing with the better students, it's been quite good. In dealing with getting all the kids educated, it's been disgraceful. And the continuous call for more spending, when you look at the results and see they're independent of spending, is just an attempt to grow the government for the sake of growing the government. And I'm appalled.
Senator Office?
So school level resources are different from the state resources that I'm talking about. The school level resources have been quite good, although they have been scaled back, and at this point in time, they're slightly below constitutional. When we were doing the Accountability in Education Act, it was $100 million over the constitutional model that was being provided, and that made a significant difference. So when you look at the history and you look at the Accountability in Education Act being passed, you look at the funding model, you see performance in the state improving. The NAEP scores improved, the YTOP scores improved. So you invested in the students, you invested in the schools, and it provided returns on those investments. And now in the last couple of years, we've starved that out a little bit. So we've actually declined a little bit in those NAEP scores, which should be expected. As far as the resources, though, what I was talking about was the Department of Education resources. So the statewide system of supports isn't a school level or district level resource. It's not part of our school foundation program funding model. It has to do with ensuring that the State Department of Education has the resources to go in and provide support for those school districts or schools that are not meeting expectations, right? We have a few different levels. We have not meeting expectations, or partially meeting expectations, and exceeding expectations are the four categories that a school and district can come in through the Accountability in Education Act. The legislation indicated that for the not meeting or partially meeting, there would be support from the Department of Education. You have to hire people to do that, and we did not provide FTEs to the department to do that. So it's not about the funding model or the school foundation program. It is just about there aren't FTEs at the Department of Education that have that as, or enough that have that as their job responsibility to manage the workload that they have. So yes, we've definitely done a good job of funding education, but we did a much better job of funding education about a decade ago, and we've been, starving it effectively since.
Any other comments? Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and open this up for, Mr. Black, okay, sorry, forgot that you were there. Anything you wanted to add at all, Mr. Black? Okay, great. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else would like to testify on this bill? Please come forward. Please introduce yourself.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'm Lisa Williams. I am a former teacher and current administrator for the Wyoming Virtual Academy. I am not here to represent my district, but I am here to address and acknowledge I appreciate your concerns for reading and the need for readers in Wyoming. I also appreciate your concern and attention to the YTOP scores. I do want to share with you, this is my 14th year with the Wyoming Virtual Academy. It's in its 16th year. Since YTOP was initiated, we have never had access to the interim assessments or the modules. And so I am nervous about some of the wording in this bill that 3,000 to 5,000 students across Wyoming who are taking this test, they do have low scores because the test is more based on what is their ability of navigating a platform they've never seen and they've never practiced on. And then we are asking a third grader to do your best on something you've never seen. It's not how my teachers teach. It's not how they learn. And they're navigating a system that you are using to identify some very impactful decisions. And so I just want you to know that I don't rely on that data. I look forward to seeing exit tickets every day of what kids can do, common formative assessments that are done weekly. I invite you to come and see more that's happening in the school system that goes beyond YTOP that's very effective. We do have individual reading plans going on with our students. But we do have programs that are the multi-tiered systems of support we have mentioned. We are implementing all of that in our online program. It's a very effective program. And it is encouraging great readers. We've had UW trustee scholarship students come out of our school. And so I just encourage you to look at a child beyond a test score, because that is not a true identification of what our teachers are doing that are amazing, what our professionally trained reading interventionists, literacy coaches. There's so much more going on beyond the Y-top. Thank you. I stand for any questions.
Questions for Ms. Williams? Okay, thank you. Thanks for making the time. Appreciate it. Anyone else who would like to testify on this bill? Please come forward.
Good morning.
Hi.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Michelle Thompson. I am a third-generation teacher. My grandmother served at the pleasure of Fremont County as a state legislator, past WA president, and I'm proud to be a teacher in the state of Wyoming. But one of the things that this bill ignores as it to the indigenous population, it also ignores ELL students. We have a high number of ELL students in a number of districts. And so it does not consider those students that speak foreign languages, and it is very complex in teaching literacy to those students. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Thompson? Yes, go ahead, Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, one comment that it doesn't, she's right, it doesn't deal with the English language learners, and that is one of the refinements, if we took this to interim, we would need to look at, Madam Chairman.
Other comments? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Chase Christensen, Superintendent, Sheridan County School District number 3. Just wanted to thank the bringer of the bill for continued care in education. I think it's important that we continue to try to find the best results for our students. I do want to just bring to light, I know that Mr. Farmer shared the results of school takeovers in many different states in the past and the research that's there behind that. One of the avenues that this bill provides for release from the school takeover is the district court releasing after 6 years. To my mind, it's probably the most likely one that is going to occur. If you've got a failing school, and we know that school takeovers don't tend to help schools, then the avenue that's going to be a release is 6 years go by, and now we're releasing that school back to local control. Our school boards across the state are working tirelessly and doing great work at the local level to know their communities, know their schools, and make sure that we're utilizing the systems provided by the state, one of those being this system of supports. I think we've got the tools in place, as Senator Roth has pointed out. If we can properly fund them and use them as they're written to be, I think we see good growth. I would hate to see the control of this go away from a school board, and in reality, what the bill does is take 6 years away from the growth process. With that, I field questions.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Christensen? Senator Scott?
Chairman, now, let me say at the outset, you're Sheridan County and all 3 of the districts in Sheridan County. No way they're ever going to be would qualify for this, because they've been all pretty successful, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for noting that, sir.
What I would suggest is that looking in the private sector where financial bankruptcies have been practiced, what happens is you get rid of an impossible situation, often get rid of a management that just failed and replace it. And then if the thing is salvageable, and the school district would be salvageable, you get it back on an even keel and proceed. And that's why this is modeled a bit after the Financial Bankruptcy Acts, with the court-appointed trustee taking a very different approach, saying that the real difficulty is a failed management. You don't touch the operating workers typically, and you need them, and the teachers are perfectly good in the state. The problem is certain districts have, and this is for the very worst, have simply consistently yielded bad results when that's not the norm, Madam Chairman. And so I guess I'm urging you to take a little broader perspective, because from Sheridan's perspective, this is not relevant to you.
Mr. Christensen, anything you'd like to add?
I didn't recognize a question there, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think there was one. Maybe it was a don't you agree question. We appreciate your testimony then, unless you have anything else to add.
Thank
Okay.
you, Madam Chair.
Thanks so much. Anyone else would like to testify on this bill? Please come forward. Welcome back.
Madam Chair, committee. I just would like to speak as a parent right now. I have twin 16-year-olds. One of them has nonverbal severe autism. I also have a current 5th grader. And I remember 2 years ago, he reads well above grade level as a 3rd grader. He took his first YTOP test and came home in tears because he didn't understand it. He could read it, but he did not know how to navigate to answer correctly. So his YTOP score was probably the worst score he's ever had on any sort of test, and it was hard on him. So now as a 5th grader, we've done some interim tests and he's familiar with it, and now he does great. But I just think that 3rd grade level is a hard snapshot to take because so many of those kids, it's their first time taking a test like that. And the navigation portion of it was really hard for him. The second thing is with my son with autism, as a parent on his IEP, we are given the option to let him take the YALT for kids on an IEP. But as a parent and an IEP, sometimes that's not the best decision for that kid to single him out and make him take that. So a lot of kids that they know will not perform well on the YTOP are given the opportunity to take it to see where they stack up against their peers. So the other part of this is we had one ELL teacher and one student a couple years ago. In 1 year, we had 20 move in. In Converse County, we have a boom and bust. So you get a lot of people that come in for 6 to 8 months and then might leave. So those kids take it also, and they don't do well. So as a board member, we sat down with our admin and did a work session on the data. Because as a board member, I was upset when I saw how, so you sit down with them and you look at the results and look at, we have 34 or 45 kids in my kid's 3rd grade class. So you had 4 kids absent because they had the flu. You've got 3 kids in there that are ELL, and you've got 2 or 3 kids that opted out of the YALT and took the YTOP test. Right there, that's 15, 20% of your students right there that did not do well on that test. So I would just like to caution you, as using that as a snapshot, as a parent of a kid that came home that read well above grade level. My wife's an English teacher, and she was as devastated as he was. So the other thing I would like to, point out is your willingness to give us local control when it comes time to raise taxes, but to take it away from us when it's time for intervention. As a board member, that's a tough pill to swallow. That's all I have.
Questions? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Please introduce yourself. We're coming down the home stretch here. We've only got another couple of minutes before we need to sneak upstairs, so I'll try to.
My name is Kim Amen, and I'm a 32-year veteran educator, and I'm the president of the Wyoming Education Association. And I'm speaking to you as a teacher who taught 3rd grade last year and the previous 4 years before that, and I've taught lots of grades, but there's a couple of concerns. One of them is what the speaker before me just talked about and the impact on children and students. Teaching 3rd grade, I don't think I can tell you how devastated those students are when we keep telling them, we need you to do your best. It's important that you do your best because there's this magic number that we all have to meet, and you have to meet your goal. And we try to pump them up, but when they don't meet that goal, they are devastated. And that sets them up for failure at test taking in general. We know that students learn best by being active in the classroom and by being engaged in their learning and by doing projects and by showing everybody what they've learned throughout the course of the year. That does not happen in a standardized test. That is one piece of information, and we need to take a lot more information when we're talking about whether we're being successful or not. And I don't think that we should be basing any punitive things on one standardized test score. We should be looking at growth. It should be a success if a student comes in and they're at basic and they get to proficient. That's successful. If they're below basic and they get to basic, that's some success. We've seen growth in that student. So I caution you to look at the students. And the other thing I want to bring up is that the YTOP test up until this year has included 3rd grade, and it includes the writing component. And so it's not really a reading assessment.
And there's a lot of writing in it, and it's the first time that the students in third grade are being asked to take the YTOP test. It's also a big change for them to stop and read something and respond to it and write to it. We had one of the speakers talk about not having access to the interim test. That may or may not be a good thing, but I would argue that we shouldn't be spending our time teaching kids how to take the YTOP tests. We should be spending our time teaching them how to read and how to be engaged in their learning and how to love learning and how to love reading. And so those are the things that I would caution you on in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salmon. Any questions for Salmon? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. We've got about 4 or 5 more minutes, so if you could just
I'll go quick.
zip through it, it'd be great. Thanks.
Madam Chair, my name is Mark Christensen. I'm Campbell County School District trustee, newly elected. I'm not here on behalf of them. I did serve for 7 years as a Campbell County trustee, or Campbell County commissioner. I know a lot of you from there. I'll be just as direct as I was then with you now. Campbell County has a school this year that was 100% achievers, all the areas. Rural school, 30-some kids. The reason that happened was because low class numbers, good student-teacher ratio, good community involvement, good community support. All of the stuff I've seen here in this bill and the previous one do nothing to impact those two things. If I'm looking at what directly impacts students, I'd say small classroom sizes, adequate funding. I would say parental involvement and community involvement. I've heard a lot this session about parental involvement. I have 4 kids. I have never once been denied anything in the schools at any of the schools my kids have went to. If anything, there has been reach out from the teachers regularly saying, can you come back in and help with math again? Can you come back in and assist with reading? Because it's nice to have that additional body in here. And I've done that every time it fit because I think that that community involvement's good. Our problem now is the funding formula says that a new teacher should make $40,000. $40,000 is poverty in Gillette, Wyoming. Your rent is gonna run you $19,000 a year. You're gonna have a new car payment after you've just gotten out of school, and then you have to live. You add to that, we can't staff aides because the pay for aides is $13 an hour. So the aides that are assisting your students are making $26,000 a year if you count them working all summer as well and figure out their own part-time employment. You then get into the parental involvement piece. The people I keep hearing scream parental involvement are never the ones that show up. My question to them when they come and they scream parental involvement is, I'm like, do you coach soccer? No. Have you shown up? No. Do you come help clean up afterwards? Have you stocked the library? Not one of the people who has ever complained about it has done any of it. On the rest of this, there's a bill this year to decrease days in this legislature. If you want to increase academic achievement, there are a lot of places post-COVID that added days to make up for the deficit that was there. I've heard a lot of conversation about 3rd and 4th grade reading. Those 3rd and 4th grade readers now were my son in COVID. They were kindergartners, and they missed out on some of that foundational framework. And I have not heard one discussion from the legislature about backfilling that. Virginia had a program that they added 10 additional days for 2 years. They saw incredible return on that money. Here I'm hearing we want to cut the days by 10. You add to that, for a group that talks constantly about being micromanaged by the feds, like I have never seen such a highly micromanaged group as education. It's really hard to like say, go forth and do good while also complying with statute, which right now is like this thick in the Green Book. And then we've also added rules that are another 18 inches. And then we've had here an entire session of everybody beating up on teachers. So it's kind of hard to get up every morning and go, you know what, I'm gonna go into school. And then we're trying to stir up and get people excited and try and retain the people that are working, try and find new ones to come to work. And that's really, really hard. Like, I can tell you how to address education. That one elementary school is proof. Good class sizes, good instructional staff, community involvement. But none of this discussion here has had anything to do with those features. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Any questions? Okay. We've got just a couple more minutes and then we've got to go. We'd love to hear from both of you though, so please go ahead and.
I'll be really brief,
Jump
Chairman
in there.
Schuler and committee,
Yep.
Teresa Chalk, Superintendent, Lincoln 1. And the good gentleman from Gillette said most of what I was going to say. So I wanted to say overall, I'm very perplexed. Today I've listened to 2 bills encouraging accountability. I wholeheartedly agree with accountability. Ask anyone that works in Lincoln County School District number 1 when it's implemented correctly. But the reason I'm perplexed is we've heard 2 bills today promoting accountability, which means we need time to educate our students. Yet we have a bill that's reducing us from 175 to 165 days and 5 PD days. Just as a reminder, we have mandates that we have to provide for teachers on professional development, suicide prevention, reading instruction, bloodborne pathogens, seclusion, and restraint. That takes 5 days. So where do we have time to do any other innovation or instruction, or our new teachers who must have teacher training to do their job? Because when I look at my reading scores go down when I hire new teachers and I haven't had the time to train them. But as soon as they're trained, they go back up. That's our trend record. So please, don't take our days away. Don't make me do it, because Lincoln 1 will have a special calendar that says you're going to come 175 and you're going to work 10. And then you also took away summer school. We have no funding for summer school anymore. So where do you want us to mitigate the gap for these students who need extra time? With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Last but not least.
All right. Charles Oski, Superintendent of the Johnson County School District number 1. And I just want to answer a couple questions. Senator Scott, you asked the question, do school districts really look at it? And I will say Johnson County School District does look at the scores, and we've made a direct focus on scores and making sure we're doing what it's best for kids. And I have a board of trustees who really takes pride in what that looks like. The other thing I want to talk about too is I'm not an expert in literacy, because most of those people are sitting right behind me chomping at the bit that want to talk here today. But the point I want to point out to you is what I've heard today is there's a lot of punitive measures. I've heard the question that teachers can get sued. Why do we want to be in the business to take care of our number 1 resource in kids when the conversation is now coming around the table? What can we do to support them to make sure we are growing our professionals? It is a profession. It's not just a job that anybody can pick up. I would ask you to question anybody that went through the letters training, which was part of the push that we've done with literacy in the state of Wyoming. That was after hours, many hours, and the changes that have happened in the district. I would encourage anybody that wants to come to JCSD number 1 or any other school district and walk into an elementary school and see what goes on a day-to-day basis, and not compare us to one-time snapshot of YTOP, which if you talk to any of those experts is not a true assessment of whether kids can read or not. So we are doing great things in the state of Wyoming. There are great teachers in the state of Wyoming. And I hope at some point in time we can start supporting those professionals so that we can get young people to come back into the profession, because this isn't just what's going to happen in the next 5 years. What are we going to do for the generation of kids and my grandkids as they come up? Is we have a pretty special thing here. Let's take a look at what we need to do to change it, but let's find a way to support it and not just be punitive about it. So with that, it's just more comments, but if there are questions, other than that, hopefully I'm the last one.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Oski? Okay. Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to close public testimony. So how about if we just pass this bill on till Wednesday, move it forward Wednesday, and then we can take more public testimony and decide which way to go with it. Appreciate all of you coming and offering your testimony, and hopefully we'll see some of you upstairs. This meeting's adjourned.